Hi there, hope you're having a great day so far. You know, life nowadays is very different to before the COVID-19 pandemic. You know, we've each been put into stressful situations and scenarios that until now we really weren't equipped to deal with. So in saying this, our chat today is a slightly different shift in focus away from what we've actually covered previously about immunity nutrition. Now, I think we just need to be mindful of all these additional pressures and stresses on us, and just to be mindful to be a lot more kinder to ourselves. While Kiddipedia has covered a lot of information from experts about how you can build your immunity in simple and healthy ways, we understand also that there are a lot of us that feel this as an additional pressure at this time. And especially if these dietary changes is something new to your family. And for many, the stresses in simply, overall with work and financial pressures, all of these are building. And one way, I guess, to be able to help reduce some of the pressure is around the judgment of food. So lucky for us, we're joined by our special guest today, Sarah Smith. Now, she's a dietitian from Bayside Dietetics, who's going to share some helpful tips how we can do this. Now, Sarah works in a private practice in Bayside, Melbourne, after working for an extensive period within the Monash Children's Hospital. Thank you for joining us today, Sarah. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Rachel. I'm well, thank you.
Awesome. Now, at the moment, we are seeking and seeing three big issues around nutrition. And as I just mentioned before, as Kiddipedia, we've actually covered a lot of these issues about how, and to be able to provide sort of simple, nutritious ways to build our immunity. However, there are some issues that we haven't covered yet that are equally as relevant. So from your perspective, can you just give us a little bit of a run through what the three main things are that you've found in the current climate, and some of the issues and topics you're seeing with your current clientele?
Yeah, sure, Rachel. As you said, and Kiddipedia has done this really well, the nutrition for immunity, that's been really important for a lot of people and something that's been covered really well. But I would reinforce that another big thing to come from the COVID-19 pandemic is the pressure and the stress that's put on people in ways they've never experienced before. And I know from my work that pressure and stress also comes from food. So there has been, for a lot of people, this new pressure on doing the right thing to build your immunity has actually just added a big burden to them in terms of the stress that they're feeling right now. And for a lot of people, it's played out and made their lives very, very difficult, and made food a very difficult thing. And that's what this interview today, that's what that's talking to. And the other big thing that seems really relevant to a lot of people is the pressure on not gaining weight during the coronavirus pandemic and isolation, and sort of looking their best and looking their fittest on the other side of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. So to begin with, what is that correlation that you've actually found between pressure and stress and food? What's that correlation that you found?
Yeah, I think that what happens is we build pressure around our food to try and help us do the right thing around food. So we build up pressure about saying, right, this is a good thing to do and that's a bad thing to do, because we feel like saying it like that will make us do the good things more and do the bad things less. So if we start to judge food and label it and judge our behaviours, it sort of comes from a place of us trying to help ourselves to do the right thing. But what the reality ends up happening is just a whole lot of pressure, number one, that affects quality of life for people. And it's a huge impact on quality of life for my clients, right? I've got a lot of people that really are affected by their judgment of food. And the second thing that can happen, in actual fact, that stress is so immense that actually it makes it really hard for people to do anything more when they're feeling that stressed. And so eating well actually is even harder. So it doesn't necessarily actually help people eat better. It's just that feeling that that's supposed to be the right thing to do.
Yeah. So the three main things that you've previously mentioned before, the first one being people wanting to build their immune system and wanting to protect themselves through their immunity against COVID-19. The second one, people are feeling really anxious, and it's all about the stress and the emotional eating that people are going through at the moment. And the third thing is about the concerns about weight gain, and that's something that we're going to discuss at a later time as well. And understandably that kids with not going back to school and actually being homeschooled in term to the likelihood of them not being as active. Potentially, boys aren't going to be playing footy, or girls aren't going to be playing footy, but no one's going to be with their hobbies and everything else. But you've mentioned these are the three main things. We are going to touch on some of those at a later stage, but for the meantime, we've actually published your article. Let's talk about that, and let's get stuck into the questions. But the article is titled "Looking After Yourself Around Food During Lockdown." For someone who hasn't read the article, can you give us a little bit of an overview about it and just what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, sure. So it talks to that second point that we've been mentioning, the stress and emotional baggage that people carry around food, and maybe just giving people permission to take the pressure off food right now. That dealing with the coronavirus and dealing with the change in life that's made for a lot of people, and I put a few examples of what my people I know well are going through at the moment. And so to think that they'd have to carry that burden of not having a job or not having an income, and then to add the pressure of doing things right by food, that's a really overwhelming place to be. And so the article is really to give people permission to let go of the burden around food and just to get through the COVID-19 and through what they need to do at this time.
Yeah. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier on, it is something that we obviously have never experienced before, and yeah, so it's a very, very mindful thing that we should be doing, is actually taking some pressure off ourselves, and this is something that is quite easy to do because it's something that we all need, which is food. Let's get stuck into the questions. Number one, which is more important right now, eating well or addressing my emotions around food?
Yeah. So that question is really important, because I can imagine for some people it feels confusing now to say, well, am I supposed to be looking after our immunity or not? And I think to help people navigate the answer to that, if you feel like you can take some information about how to build your immune system, so for example, when you go to the shops, you get some capsicum to go in your stir fry because that's high in vitamin C, and you choose some kiwi fruit because they're really, they're great right now, and they're also high in vitamin C. And that's about all the thought you put into it. So it helps you to make a change, but it's just a really basic, simple thought. And it was a bit of information that was helpful. Then great, go for it and go put in all those, use the information in that way. Sounds really helpful. Mm-hmm. But if you find that information is just adding to the story that you have already around food. So for example, you might have a story where you're supposed to eat clean, where you're not supposed to have much processed food, where you're supposed to get through Easter without chocolate. A new one of late seems to be that you don't get to eat meat at the moment. If you've got that story, and then we add to that, oh, here's a burden from the pandemic, here, do this around food, and all of a sudden that becomes very overwhelming and stressful for you, then I actually think it's more important for you to have the permission to just let go of thoughts around, stress and pressure around food right now.
Mm-hmm. And as we discussed in our last chat, that the connection between stress and immunity is. Could you tell us a little bit about that too?
Yeah, that's really that's a good point that I hadn't sort of brought today. In that you do, if we're building up your stress levels, stress is not good for the body in many different ways. It's a really short-term system that works really well and helps you out for a very short-term stress in your body. But if you're going to have stress within your body for a long period, it actually starts to do harm, including things like reduced immunity.
Yeah. So I guess the weird thing is that if we are potentially eating foods that are a little less nutritious for us, but we're not as stressed, our body's going to absorb that food better if we're eating a full bowl of veggies but we're highly stressed. If you understand what I'm saying. So case scenario one is that we're highly stressed, our body's under that fight or flight sort of state. But when we are stressed, our body's immune system is lowered. So are you sort of saying at this stage we are better to be eating what we can when we can, and actually just try as much as possible to release all that burden and stress? Is that right?
Yeah, just do what you can at the moment around food, for sure. That's exactly right. It's a different situation around getting to the shops, around the food that you can buy. There's so many new stresses right now that are enough to deal with around food. So you certainly don't have to get the food right at the moment.
Yeah. Okay, next question. How do I let go of my battle with food?
So if you've identified with that scenario where the stress around food is a burden that you're carrying and it's really affecting your quality of life, and you do think, hang on, that's a good point, let me do something about it, then I'd suggest probably the first thing to go about doing is really identifying what's going on for you, because you can only release stuff that you're really aware of. So for anyone who is listening and sort of curious about the way that they are around food, just have a listen to the way you talk to yourself around food. Listen to the way that you label food. Is there much judgment in that? And perhaps even compare the way that you talk around food and make decisions around food to the way you talk to your kids, for example. Is there sort of a different degree of warmth to the judgment potentially that you have when it comes to language around food? So really actually getting an awareness of what's going on and identifying the situation would be my strong, recommendation for a starting point to try and reduce that battle around food.
Okay. So in your experience, like with your clientele, how have you helped people sort of move through that shift?
Good point. It's really, when I talk to clients, really them sharing their story just hits so many light bulbs off along the way. People go, oh gosh, that's what I didn't realise that's the degree to which I was treating myself around food. And so that awareness, I find in my experience, is really, really helpful. And the other one that I'll often get clients to do is to tell me about the feeling they get around eating food that they might be judging. So, for example, something that often happens for people is that they judge a food as bad so that they want to stop eating it. So they say, right, if I tell myself that this food is bad, then I won't have that food. But they do, of course, because we all eat the different, beautiful range of food out there. We're very lucky to have the range of foods out there, and it doesn't make any sense that there's a food that you shouldn't be allowed to have. But then, of course, if you eat the food that you feel bad about, there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. And I've asked clients to what degree do they feel guilty about eating certain foods. And in fact, one of my clients this week told me they feel more guilty about eating certain foods than they do if they had have gone to the shops and stolen the food itself.
Wow.
So guilt around food can be beyond guilt for stealing.
God, that's incredible. That's quite powerful,
isn't it?
Yeah. So
it's just food. It's just food we're talking about.
Yeah. So the main battle that you're mentioning is the fact that we identify certain foods that we like to eat as being bad, whatever they are, and that's so we need to be able to release that judgment of saying to ourselves during this stressful time at the moment, identifying the good, bad, and if you're eating the bad foods of feeling guilty. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. Full permission is given to take away any judgment of food right now. Just get through.
Okay,
for sure.
And is that still saying, as an accredited nutritionist and dietitian, that we as much as possible should be eating our healthy foods and everything that we've spoken about previously, but at the moment, if there is the opportunity, I don't know why I just said the word opportunity, but if you do choose to eat those foods that you are judging as being bad, just release that pressure from yourself.
Yeah, because I think it's not as if that pressure is helpful anyway. It's not as if you could go out and you find out the people who don't eat a certain food is because they're judging it. In actual fact, the people that judge a food are actually more likely to be eating that food anyway. So it's not even a helpful thing anyway. It doesn't help. Where in actual fact, what we know, if you can sort of clear the clutter of emotion and judgment around food, you can actually bring someone back down to peace with food. And then it's much easier from there to find your way and actually eat. If it's important to you, then you make the choice to eat nutritious then without all that sort of judgment and guilt associated with it.
Okay, cool. And that leads perfectly onto my next question. If I stop judging food, will I just gain weight?
Yeah. And that question is so important because there is not a single person that I've done work with that wouldn't relate to that in some way. It's a really important thing in our society is to look a certain way and have a certain weight. So there's a huge fear that if you don't keep yourself in check through judging food, that you'll suddenly eat a whole lot of food and then blow out and gain a whole lot of weight. But in actual fact, my experience is that is not the case at all. In fact, if anything, I would say that judging food actually causes people potentially to overeat more, because when you're really judgmental and guilty around food, it's actually really hard to be present and engaging with that food. You tend to have an experience where you just want to get it over and done with and get rid of. So as opposed to being able to be really relaxed and mindful about what you're eating. And because of that, it's quite possible to overeat or undereat.
Interesting. Is it the psychology of when you want to go onto a diet, somehow you end up eating more food than if you, it's like, which is a
Yeah.
pressure, a food pressure. Is that right?
Yeah. And do you know what? I think, if anything, this coronavirus has given us a really interesting analogy that the fear of us not having enough toilet paper had us going out and buying masses of toilet paper. And people will do that around food too. If you fear you're not going to get enough, and that's what a diet is, it tells you that you're not going to get enough for your body. So hence you're going to have this inbuilt anxiety and fear around that. You'll just go out and at some stage try and get enough to eat and sort of overeat as a result of that.
Must be like a fight or flight type of thing inbuilt in our subconscious as human beings. So
because we're not supposed to undereat, so just for sure.
Yeah. So could you give us a little bit of a recap on, I guess, the key points for everyone watching, and that you want to share today?
Yeah, sure. So I'd say if you've listened this far, it's probably really relevant to you that there's a lot of emotion around food, and I'd say that's really normal, and you're amongst a lot of other people that are feeling that emotion at this time. But right now, I would give you encouragement just to try and identify that emotion and guilt that you might be feeling and the pressure you're feeling around food, and if you feel permission to try and release that and let that go, at least for the short term while you're getting through COVID-19. And there isn't a downside of that. There isn't a downside of weight gain for doing that. In actual fact, what you might find is this immense freedom around food again. It might actually pay you back in really nice ways that you weren't expecting around food.
Yeah, really insightful sort of information and advice today. Thank you so much. And if families have got any other questions for you, whereabouts can they find you?
Yes, I'm Bayside Dietetics. My email is always a tongue twister, but it's www.baysidedietetics.com.au. And really, if you've listened to this and you think, actually, that's really important to me, but I feel really lost in how to do it, that would be something I'd be very happy to help anyone listening to be able to do. It's something I do a lot of, Rach, so that would be, a resource that anyone could take up. So thanks for having me.
I'm just really grateful for your time. Right, you take care, and we'll speak soon.
You too, Rach. Yes.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.